You unlock this benefit with the key of Patreon. Beyond is another dimension. A dimension of thought. A dimension of speculation. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both waffle and substance. Of things and ideas. You've just crossed into the podcast zone.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Trekking Through the Twilight Zone. Here we are at our Season 1 recap. It's been me and Julian talking about not all the episodes, we'd be here forever, but we're going to go through, talk about some of the tropes, the highlights, the lowlights, and some of the things that stood out for us. So let's start there with Julian. Any first thoughts then on the first season of the Twilight Zone?
No, I mean, I love Twilight Zone, and I think that we've identified as we've gone some sort of tropes like, golly gee, they're really on Earth, or, it's all, been a hallucination like the first episode is. And there are stronger and weaker episodes, and I think we have to remember that, it's a remarkable level of quality for a show that was produced so quickly. But it's really the great episodes that live on.
Yeah, I mean, this was 36 episodes, that's a long season. And if you're doing this week to week, that's a lot to bang out and ideas to. So I agree. Like, there are tropes. There are repeat ideas in this. You said the afterlife. This idea of bargains in the afterlife comes up repeatedly. Hallucinations. As you say, oh, they're on Earth, or oh, you thought it was Earth, but it's not. So yeah, no, I can understand that why those things come up. And I think the thing is, there's a bell curve, isn't there? Of this season, it's like there's a portion that are classic and stand out, and there's a portion that are like crap and like really for me don't work. But the majority are in the middle, where I'm like, yeah, do you know what? The vast majority of the episode's entertaining. It works. It's fine. It's a good idea. It might not stick the landing or whatever, but there's that sort of like portion in the middle where I'm like, yeah, they're fine. But it's those ones you say that are in the great category that really make this show. And I can see why this is such a having never seen it before, but such a cornerstone of pop culture.
Yeah, I mean, I would say a little more generously that if there is a bell curve, I mean, there are really not a lot of episodes that are really crap.
No,
most episodes are right in there at like, a 6, they're not stunning, but, I mean, it's sort of like right at that sort of like 5.5, 6, 6.5. So, I mean, that's a pretty high bar. I mean, when I have to rate shows that I'm binging and I'm enjoying, I'm really looking for I'll keep watching if it's 6s, but I'm really looking for those episodes that are, a 7, an 8, and there aren't many in history that I'll rate a 9. But yeah. What were some of the worst episodes for you? We talked about the very worst, the ones that are crap.
You're right. I'm quickly looking through a list to try and remind myself. The ones that stand out to me are. I'll go backwards a little bit. There isn't many. There's probably the more I think about it, a passage for a trumpet like just fell flat. Like, it's not. I don't know. Crap's probably too much of a strong word. It's just at the wrong end. The one that I come back to the most though is Fever. The Fever.
Yes.
The gambling
on
one.
my list.
Is one where I'm like, I could watch it again, but only to be sort of like, what am I watching? Because this seems to be so out of place and so ham-fisted compared to some of the subtlety and nuance of some of the others. I'm just like, what? They're the ones that sort of really sort of stand out the most? I mean, again, in 36 episodes, two that really, perchance to dream. Actually, that's another one.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is the one where to refresh viewers' minds, where it's just everything is in a dream, and there are people in the dream that reflect reality, but it just doesn't work and doesn't amount to anything. The third, and it's curious that the three that I would rate the lowest are those two, but I kind of like The Fever. I kind of admire what it's doing. There's a version. You know what I'm saying? Like it's an anti-gambling episode in 1960. I mean, that's there's a version of it that's good. It just isn't good. Perchance to Dream is just very far away from a good one. Curiously, also Mr. Denton on Doomsday, which is that confused Western episode.
Yeah, that is
the third episode.
I was just looking at that one. That was what we mentioned before, the Fate one, when it's sort of like, I think with that, I think back on it, and although the ending is all very confused, there is still something in that episode I kind of like about this idea of fate, and this younger version of himself. It's not literally like this standing for himself as a younger person sort of thing, and is interesting. It is messy though, and this idea of a drunk in the West sort of is a bit of a cliche. But so what ones are the other end then? A couple that really stand out for you.
It's hard to sort of narrow down. I mean, I definitely have a handful that are among my favorite. One of the earliest is still Walking Distance. Which is the man going into his old Midwestern home, and it is amazing to me how well that works emotionally. It's one of the, we're talking about repeated tropes. It's one of the episodes that just doesn't explain what happens at all. And often these are time travel episodes where somebody just like wanders through the desert and they're in another time or something. And I kind of like those episodes where those are the most kind of Twilight Zone-y episodes in a way, that it's just like, there's something weird going on in our reality. Now watch people kind of suffer, and struggle with this vortex of, just weirdness that's around them. But it works emotionally, and it's also amazing how much happens within that 22 minutes. I mean, it's a whole movie of plot that you get.
Yeah, that is a good one, and I think there are episodes in that, sections in that episode, when he has to interact with his parents, and things like, there's moments in that, and that really stand out, and are just really good. Like when his dad actually comes out to him after, and they have that sort of brief conversation, like it's really, it's a really fascinating moment. You're like, wow, this is 1959. Like they're really batting this out of the park. So yeah, no, there's some. Yeah, that is a good one. I do think that is a good one. It starts strong though, the season for me. There's sort of, from those early ones. The 16 millimeter shrine really sort of stood out for me. And there's that first sort of batch, and that's sort of when we were first working through these, as the concept of an aging actress and still trying to go into it, but then the final twist just being so weird of her sort of like walking into this world, like physically walking into this other world, and living in this sort of this version of herself from sort of like 30 years before, is absolutely fascinating. And obviously,
yeah, that's sort of metafiction that it's amazing how many of these have some element of metafiction which we associate with postmodernity, which obviously it started in 1960, but we think of it in television as a much later development.
Yeah. No, that was a shocker to me, watching that one. That ending was a real shocker. and it's dark, and it's sort of, it really plays on the psychological sort of this idea of aging and feeling relevant and this other stuff. I was really sort of, yeah, no, that was a good one. And that sort of set me up to be like, oh, okay, this is, and then it's, to be fair, that is followed by Walking Distance, so you get this sort of like double punch of like, oh, these are really cool. So
yeah, those are the two real standouts for me. In the first several episodes. Then we get to Time Enough at Last, which is the classic. I mean, that's also up there. What's the next one that you've got?
Well, Time Enough at Last is definitely up there, like you say. We talked about that with Tony. Got Burgess Meredith in, which is, which we will be doing in the next episode, is a sort of a spot the who's that person I know from something else kind of thing. One of the ones that sort of, this one's grown on me, and I think I sort of may have not made fun of it or something, but the one that I've gone back to a little bit in my head is The Four of Us Are Dying.
Yeah. Yeah, that is not one of my favorite ones, and that has not grown on me, my friend.
No, and I don't know if it's the episode or the concept, because it's messy. It's a messy episode, but I still kind of like this idea of sort of like, and the ending is sort of, the one thing with a lot of these episodes we've said is they're all done in 22 to 26 minutes. Mm-hmm. There's a lot goes on, and to me, The Four of Us Are Dying is one of those stories where, like, if you had another 15 to 20 minutes of this to really let this breathe, it would be a lot more impactful. If this was like an hour show, with adverts, 45 minutes of playtime, that ending could be stretched out to be a bit more impactful, where it's the father of this person whose face he imitates, right? Getting his revenge for the way he was treated. Like, you could have this impact and stuff and deal into it. But it's one of those episodes that sort of stuck with me, that I wasn't so impressed with to begin with, but the more I'm like, actually, then there's something about that I kind of like, and I'm kind of digging. So yeah, that's one of those sort of mid-season, I suppose you say.
Yeah, I mean, I always remember, I do remember that episode, right? Which I'll give it credit for that. Yeah. And I will say, I'll give it credit for what you're saying, sort of like that it needs more time. And I feel like a lot happens in that episode. I mean, you have like 4 different personalities. There's a good twist. Mm-hmm. I just don't think any of it works. And I'm not invested in, I don't know why he's got this power. And, I'm not invested in any of those characters. That him wanting to escape with the girl, he's kind of raping her, Revenge of the Nerd style. I mean, it doesn't work for me.
No, and that's the thing. Like, I don't want him to be a hero. I'm not saying I want to follow this guy as a hero, but like, there's this concept of like a guy that abuses his power and then gets comeuppance for having abused the power. And I think there's a better way of telling that story. But I just like, I don't know, the concept sort of stuck with me. Just going to throw one other in that around this era that sort of I've not forgot about, but was, I'm trying to see which one it was. It's that, and when the sky opened, or when the sky was opened, which is when the guy, those 4, 3, 2, 1 pilots,
survivors,
start to disappear. And the fact that you said, as you said, with the distance, walking distance, like it doesn't explain itself. It's got no intention of doing so. It does things where you're like, hang on a minute, like it keeps you off guard. That was a corker. That was a really good episode.
Yeah, that's on my list too. I quite like that, and I feel like I want to like it more than I do. Like it's still on my short list, right? But I want to like it more than I do. Although I really like everything that it's doing. I love everything that you're talking about. It is so well acted.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I think is better than that, that I sort of doesn't have intellectually, like its foundation isn't as good at all as When the Sky Was Open. Disappearing from continuity, right? That's great.
Mm.
Is Third from the Sun, which is the family on that base, and then this is like one of the well, it's not really
Yeah.
Earth episodes, but it's like my favorite from the first season.
It has a good. It works well, I think, and it earns its reveal, I think, as well. That episode, in clever ways, and it has that great moment where obviously they face up to the guy that's going to sort of turn them in. Yeah, I'm sort of. I could flip this round for you for what you're saying about and When the Sky Was Open. It's one of those where I go, yeah, I liked everything that episode did. I think I should and want to like it more. But I don't think it had the lasting impact on me that some of the others did.
Well, I mean, I think we're basically on the same page with everything, with the exception of The Four of Us Are Dying. That's the one real exception of that we disagree so far. Although, like different things touch us at different moments, right? The another one that sort of sticks with me is Elegy, and it's the one with the cemetery asteroid with the android and the stuffed people, and
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
No,
but that's it's much like sort of, this is like my version of The Four of Us Are Dying. Like this one doesn't work, but I love it so much. Like it's like such a perversely bad idea. I mean, like there's no good intellectual foundation to this episode, but it's so charming in its sort of Red Dwarf like bizarreness.
Yeah. That's the only thing is like what I remember saying it stuck with me, but only I think on that premise. I'm like, this so should have been a Red Dwarf episode. It's weird enough, but like it sort of doesn't work. Like, yeah, it's fine and it's quite quirky, and I like some of the ideas in it. Like, what is it? The beauty pageant
Yes.
part is brilliant. Like, that's a great notion, where she's not conventionally attractive, but that's how she wanted to be seen, and all this other stuff. So there's good moments in it, but yeah, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, the central premise is so, I mean, but isn't this true? It's so absurd, but isn't that true of so much of science fiction, where it's like the simplest way of dealing with this isn't to build a space station or, to turn in its, the easiest way to trade in widgets isn't to build a widget planet that only specializes in making those widgets.
We've got limited burial space, so we're going to build another place with limited burial space.
Yeah, how do you, get people out of that asteroid? It doesn't make any sense, but it's so charming to me that, it overrules that.
Yeah, there's an episode that neither of us have mentioned yet, and we spent a great deal of time on, actually, and that we both really enjoyed, I think, was The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another classic. I mean, to me, that's like Time Enough at Last.
Yes.
Where it's an indisputed classic. You've got to include it on the list, right?
Yeah, it was fantastic. I really enjoyed the episode. Weirdly, I think both. I don't know. I'll ask you. I actually think I like the original. I think I like the remake a little more. I think that the remake had more time. It's a longer episode, and was able to be a little bit more nuanced in the consequences of some of the actions.
Yeah, I don't know that I like the remake better. I have both of them as an 8 to me, but I do think that the remake is better written. That it is just structurally more there. It's got more time, but it's from an era where you have more time to actually write it. You're not writing it in a week. And so it's able to sort of, tie it to the homeowners association and terrorism and sort of tease out some of the implications of its plot. And I think that one of the weaknesses of the Twilight Zone is that it's so damn good, especially being churned out and being the product of one person, which when is that really true of a TV series? But the weakness of that format is, of course, that there are so many episodes where you think this is full of potential, full of ideas, but it didn't germinate. You didn't have time to sort of see how those themes reverberate through the whole episode and the implications.
Yes, no, I agree with that. Like, yeah, it's either or. It's definitely worth revisiting. Like, I think it's such a milestone actually of this. Again, like you said, I agree. It's up there with Time Enough at Last. It's an absolute doozy.
I would add, in between is Mirror Image, which sticks with me.
Yeah, I almost I was thinking about this, and I was just looking at Mirror Image, and I like Mirror Image. I thought it was a very good one with the woman at the bus stop and how she starts to question reality. She sees another version of herself. This comes back to this thing that you mentioned before early on about this idea of this metafiction that starts to seep into these episodes. And you get them in these little blasts. You get Mirror Image quickly followed by A World of Difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like the fact that in 1959, 1960, this idea of sort of like doppelgangers in sort of mirror image or like mirror universe versions of yourself, or the fact that like fiction can be reality or reality can be fiction, and you can merge between the two. These ideas are like, these are big ideas, and in most part played it well. Mirror Image has quite a dark ending because she's carted off, and you see her mirror version on the bus.
Yeah.
I think you and I sort of slightly disagreed on the interpretation of that ending. Mm-hmm. But again, A World of Difference has an ending where you and I both sort of said this idea that like the world he's going into, that he returns to, like, is it being destroyed?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this episode about the destruction of a fictional universe, and we're going to see it? Like, I love the fact I'm watching this show, and I'm from a black and white 60-year-old show, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm going to start talking about this idea of sort of like fictional universes and the impact on reality. It shows how strong sort of science fiction was, and ideas like these twist ideas were over half a century ago. And we often, as things get churned up and get recycled and remade and reused, and people sort of see things today and go, oh my God, yeah, this ideas are so fresh and so new. And you're like, actually, some of this was done in a quirky TV show from 1960.
Yeah, I think A World of Difference is radically undervalued as an episode. And we've talked about sort of the metafiction of 16 millimeter Shrine and the metafiction of A World of His Own. As the last episode of the season, both have just clear metafictional elements. But A World of Difference, the entire thing is metafiction.
Yeah,
and it's shocking right from the start. I mean, it's just shocking, and it also is one of those episodes that is just delightful to watch.
Yes.
And I think the Twilight Zone knows that it has great ideas, it has social messages, but it also knows that its function is to entertain. I mean, it's from an era of television where you could not pretend that wasn't the case, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that people make TV now and think we're going to bore you to death, but I mean, there is the intersection of art and commerce that's going on here, or art and entertainment. Clearly there's art involved, but there's no illusion that this isn't also commerce and entertainment. That's right there at the, there's no separation. And I think for it to be doing, be so delightful, so entertaining, and still so postmodern, so ahead of its time. I mean, for me, A World of Difference is up there with anything else.
Yeah, it's one of the episodes like that have stuck in my head. There are episodes where I've gone, oh yeah, that was really cool. And it's one of those ones that sort of like this element of meta fiction throughout has just sort of like really surprised me, where it has gone, and it's meant more to me than some of the episodes that I thought would. Like I'm not particularly spiritual. I'm not particularly, I'm not religious, and there's an awful lot of afterlife narrative in this series as well. Making bargains with the devil, or doing something to with the angels, which again is a charmingly nice episode. Very early on, what's it called? One for the Angels is a really touching, well done episode. Like, it's kind of nice. It's fun, as you said, entertaining. But then you get all these other sort of like afterlife narratives, all the way up to A Passage for Trumpet and all this other stuff, and it sort of just gets samey.
Yeah,
and it's sort of like, yeah, I get it. You have to be a good person, or you have to be authentic, or integrity. It's fine. It never sort of changes. Even the hell one. What was the one where the guy goes to like his perfect, I'll call it his perfect hell.
The one with the Nazi U-boat thing.
No,
no, you're talking about
that's Judgment Night. So you got Judgment Night, where a guy has to, is forced to live over that event over and over again. No, the one
A Nice Place to Visit.
A Nice Place to Visit.
Right.
And again, it's the same sort of concept of like, you think you're in heaven, but you're in hell. And it's like,
yes,
it feels very. Even then, it felt like, okay, this afterlife narrative is not. It's not boring, because they are entertaining when you're watching them, but they're not.
Well, okay, so there is this. Let me introduce this idea about genre, right? Like, we're covering the Twilight Zone on a science fiction podcast, right? Not all of the Twilight Zone is science fiction. And in fact, people who would defend The Outer Limits compared to the Twilight Zone would say The Outer Limits is real science fiction. The Twilight Zone is supernatural, sci-fi, and weird. So there are episodes where, like with the woman in the bus station in Mirror Image, where is that science fiction? Is that supernatural? I don't know. Is there, it's weird. It's a sort of what is it? Eldritch story kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, and I am happy to. What I would say is, though, I agree. You know me, I like weird fiction. Like I'll start with Lovecraft and work from there, sort of through to Thomas Ligotti. But one of the problems I have with some of the supernatural elements of this is they're all very, and correct me on this, it's all very Christian based.
Yeah.
And that's fine, but it then becomes very repetitive.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's, there are elements like, I like the Love Potion episode. It's not in my list of great episodes, it's The Chaser, but I think it's a solid, Love Potion episode, Love Potion story, right? But that's supernatural. But, I think the elements that you're describing, like the ones that I like best, are usually the ones that have the least supernatural elements.
Yes.
It's where there's a guardian angel. It's there's death. One for the Angels, where the pitchman meets death. That works a lot better than you're in hell, you're in heaven. There are ghosts. I mean, limiting that supernatural works better, and also, probably to your point, strips it of just feeling like, oh, okay, another Judeo-Christian kind of, afterlife version.
Yeah, definitely. And I also agree with, like, to me, the ones that work best are probably the weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of the sci-fi ones are absolutely fantastic. Like you say, some really strong ones. But the weird are the ones I really like. When it is that sort of like, they're not going to explain stuff. It's just, if this was written as a weird short story, you'd probably have a bit more in a monologue, and you'd probably get some bit more. You could probably expand on some of these stories. But like, I'll use Mirror Image as a good example. Like Mirror Image, if that was in an anthology of weird tales, books, short story, weird tales, that would be an absolute blinder. And again, the same for A World of Difference. I'll use those two again, and there's I'll think of a few others where that works perfect because it's in TV. It nails it because of the medium in which it's being presented, and that again, fantastic idea. And so it works really well. But some of the other ones, like you say, the I'm trying to think of another good example. When the Sky Opened is another good one. I'd say that's more of a. It's not said it's science fiction. It's never established it's science fiction because, like you said, they're being eradicated from continuity, from reality. It's another good weird tale.
I think that's the one that combines the weird, sort of genre that we're talking about with science fiction, where the Venn diagram where they overlap, and When the Sky is Opened is in the middle there.
Yes, so it's those sort of ones I kind of like.
Well, I mean, looking at the ones that we've rated the most, I mean, 16 millimeter Shrine and Walking Distance, those are both sort of not science fiction. Those are both more sort of weird stories. Time Enough It Lasts is more science fiction, but it's sort of gentle, right? There's no weird devices or something. There's just it's alternate timeline, right, with nuclear war. When the Sky is Opened is sort of weird plus science fiction, right? Third from the Sun for me is, that's science fiction, more solidly. Elegy is more solidly science fiction. Mirror Image is weird. Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is like another genre of just real. There's just not. I mean, I guess, well, there are aliens at the end, right? So it is technically science fiction. But there are a few episodes where they're just not supernatural or weird or science fiction. But A World of Difference, that's weird too, right?
Yes. And I think that's where I lean. Those sorts of ones do really work for me. You say about the real, again, like the Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. The other one we talked about has been whether it's real or not. Again, is like Nightmare as a Child.
Yeah, I wondered if you're going to mention that as one of your favorites.
It does. It sort of again comes into this weird thing of like, if this was in an anthology of weird tales, like I could see this being a really creepy, disturbing tale about, does it work
trauma
as trauma, projections, and all this other stuff? Like, it's one of those ones where sort of like, does it work as an episode? Yeah, it sort of does. I like it because it's quite dark. It was darker than I expected some of this place to go. But like, there's still this element of the weird of like, did she actually see herself? Was it just a hallucination? Was it a mental break? Was it some of those sort of things? Yeah.
And, it's interesting that, Nightmare as a Child is sort of, I think it's better put together, but I think I prefer A Stop at Willoughby, which is the next episode. Yeah, and even though it sort of has some of the same themes as Walking Distance, with the sort of escape to a Midwestern sort of dream or an idyllic sort of Americana. But what's interesting to me is that both of those episodes, thinking about them in terms of genre, they're both sort of weird. But in both cases, they could also be, they're sort of at the intersection between weird and reality, where both of them could totally take place in a universe with no science fiction or supernatural elements, because the weirdness is either hallucination caused by PTSD, or it's a dream as a guy is going crazy and then dying.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's one of those that, like, you could totally take both of those and give them a purely psychological angle, or a purely psychological reading. that at the end of A Stop at Willoughby, he just steps off a moving train, and that's him in a dream fugue state, and that's what happened. Like, he's stress and anxiety has got on top of him. Push, push, push. But the same as a nightmare child, like you said, PTSD, trauma, repressed nightmares, all that sort of thing, and then the killer coming back to confront her, like bringing it all back. You could take that as you could do that both as a psychological, but there is that element of weird in both of them where you could say, well, actually, is there a reality where he does settle down in Willoughby and become whatever, or was it some supernatural element that did intervene that's helped her identify these repressed memories and stuff?
Right. And even if they are a hallucination, the effect of it on the reader or the viewer is that of a weird story. And there's plenty of weird fiction, right? That ultimately ends up not being something supernatural or sci-fi, and we still understand them as being part of that genre. So I mean, I think that's interesting too. And for me, the After Hours is the best of the sort of last bunch. Yes. And that's also not sci-fi, right? That's also just weird and creepy.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of leaning into horror almost, but that's definitely like a weird tale, like that thing of you mentioned about Eldritch, like something going on underneath the skirt, almost like urban fantasy. This idea of sort of something going on underneath society, a different world that we don't know about. And I kind of love those sorts of tales, like everything from like Neverwhere, through to what do they call them? Sort of like supernatural detectives kind of tales.
Yeah.
And this sort of fits
stuff like Harry Potter has that, the sort of what we don't see.
Yes, the stuff stuff between the cracks that we don't see, and I kind of like that kind of thing. Like, and this is much more subtle. Like, there's no sort of actually, let me put it this way: my instant response to creating some grand conspiracy around how it all works basically tells you that I'm expecting it to be like there's not the wizarding world, there's a mannequin world, or like in Neverwhere, there's a complete underground for all this stuff. Like, I have a delusion for these things. But yes. Anyway, we've actually gone really long on this one, but that's a great recap.
Were there others that you found that I haven't mentioned and you haven't mentioned?
Not
Any
really. A final one, I think. No, because we could just go across all of them. To be perfectly honest. No more that I really want to get into. I think we've done a great review of the season. It's been a fantastic run. I'm fascinated to see more. One of the things I will say about going forwards, there are still images that I recognize as being from the Twilight Zone of episodes that I have not seen yet. I am looking forward to finding out where those are. There's the some of the famous ones is like the pig-looking alien monster thing.
Yes, I know. Yeah, they're not. Yeah, they're not aliens. I mean, that is a classic episode, though.
Yeah.
You get to that. That's.
And there's obviously the little boy that can think a person away and all that kind of stuff. I've seen images from that. So I'm very much like, if this is the first season, like, I cannot wait to get into the rest.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I mean, I've got like, I sort of do this in my head with episodic shows where I'm like, okay, I can make a list of 11 episodes that I think you've got to see in this season, right? That's almost a third of the episodes. That is a higher percentage than Star Trek has. It's a higher percentage than Doctor Who. It's a higher percentage than almost anything for the first season of Twilight Zone. And also keep in mind, we've prattled on for 36 episodes, but this is a total of less than 20 hours of television. We're talking about the equivalent of 18 hour-long episodes. That's less than a season used to be on a network. That's less than any season of Star Trek until It's on Paramount Plus.
Yeah.
That's a remarkably small amount of minutes to, while uneven, and we started talking about the bell curve, to produce that many amazing classic episodes. So it is uneven, but I mean, the hit rate is just effing absurd to me.
Oh, no, I totally agree. I mean, one of the things I shall point out, and it's my own nitpicking, is this notion. I'll say, like, yeah, I liked it and everything, but it didn't stick the landing. Or, yeah, it was all good apart from this. Like, that's what we're here for. We nitpick in these little moments. But I apart from a couple where I'm like, yeah, I'm never going back to watch that one. Like, I could easily sit through this again. Because again, look, the two key things are, as you've said, it's designed to be entertaining. And it is. Like, if you take it just viewing, now I've sat and analysed it and I've had to take it in, I could just sit and watch some of this stuff and have it playing. And the good thing is, they are short. 22 to 25 minutes. And so it's one of those that, like, even for the ones you don't really like, let's say The Fever, like, yeah, it's gone in 20 minutes. So if you have to sit through them, like, it's gone, it's fine. But the ones that work, the ones that are really good, are absolutely packed. Or when they get to their twist, they've engrossed you for so long that their twist is an absolute gut punch. And I think of, like, the 16mm Shrine. And when I first sat and watched the episode, bloody hell, I'm like, the whole thing works up to this thing. It centers around this woman who's growing eccentricity and depression about growing old. To then have it topped off with this thing of, like, yeah, well, I'm going to go live in this fictional world inside this movie screen is, and then you're left with it. You're left with someone seeing that, and I'm like, yeah, we're 4 episodes into this TV show, and they are not going to let up. So you're right.
That's ambitious. I mean, and you can't believe that was made in 1960, and that it works. I mean, one of the things that I keep coming back to, I mean, you're absolutely right in everything that you said. And, there is a season that's hour long, and I haven't seen almost any of it. So I'm looking forward to it. But one thing that I really appreciate, especially, as a writer, is how, I mean, this is true of some of the old Star Trek. I mean, it's true of, classic stuff from this era, the first Doctor Who episode, some of these movies that we've watched from, the sort of late 50s. I mean, at their best, these are just really well structured. And even bad episodes of Twilight Zone, where we're hitting them, still know what a theme is and weave it through in some way. And it's not like modern, movies where you say, like, this is $100 million movie. How do you not understand what a theme is and weave it throughout? And we're hitting Twilight Zone when it fails to do that adequately. But it's partly because, in this era, the element of just a well-told story that was structured properly from beginning to end and had a theme woven through it was just expected. And, I really appreciate that kind of storytelling and the concept of a well-told tale.
Yes, no, I agree. Well told is a phrase I would come back to. Even, like I say, even some of the ones I don't care for are well told for the most part. I think there's a couple where you probably could go, another slight draft could have changed things, but no, and again, week to week. And the thing I say, like, different writers, like, if Rod Serling is the sort of the showrunner, all the bits and pieces, it's just an absolute feat. 36 episodes, 36 weeks. Amazing. Absolutely.
Yeah, in
amazing.
1 year. I mean, it's staggering. You also think, like, I'm a writer. I think how long it takes me to write something.
Yeah.
Can you imagine, I mean, having a year of your life in which you produced 36 of these things?
Yeah.
That is batting this kind of average. I mean, that if you had 1 year of your life that you did that, you'd be like, I'm done for the rest of my life. Like, I've accomplished something amazing.
Yeah.
And we've got more.
Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm looking forward to more. That the one thing is, like I said, this season has reassured me that it's probably going to be a little uneven, and that's to be expected when you have this many episodes. I think the second season's around the same number,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fine. But do you know what that, like you say, if we're hitting a third that are really going to impress me,
Yeah.
brilliant. That means I'm going to get 10 to 12 episodes that I'm going to want to go back and see. And if that's consistent across all 5 seasons, is it 5 seasons?
Yeah.
I'm going to end up with around between 80 to 90 episodes of television that I'm going to go, yeah, I'm going to go back and watch that because it's really good.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and we will.
Yeah.
So it really is a journey, and we'll continue our trek through the Twilight Zone.
We will, yes, ladies and gentlemen. Any final thoughts before we do sort of we do cap that off?
No, I think it's a wonderful trip that we're taking, and I hope that people are taking it with us. And if we're recording this in 2021, and if you're listening to this in 2021, it means that you are contributing to our Patreon and getting this ahead of time, getting weekly Twilight Zone injections right into your brain.
Yes.
And I just want to say thank you for supporting us. If you're listening to this when it's publicly available, we're seasons ahead by then, probably on the Patreon. So jump on and get the new stuff.
And if you are listening to this in the public, like you say, we would be on seasons ahead. We may even be into things like the Outer Limits or other versions of the Twilight Zone. Go check it out, because it's not just this we do. There's other things on the Patreon. There are literal hours worth of episodes of stuff on there now. It's a lot of it me prattling on, but it's got some interesting thoughts. But you get some decent stuff on there, and it's all for a minimal £5. That's it. Well, again, not depending on what way this country goes after we've recorded this, but at the moment, £5, £5 a month. And yeah, all support is greatly appreciated, and it helps us keep the lights on at 20th Century Towers, and keeps these podcasts going out for free and ad free. Apart from this advert, but this is an advert for us, so that doesn't count. So anyway, Julian, as always, this has been an absolute blast. I'm fascinated and looking forward to the next season and doing more on Stories Out of Time and Space. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us and trekking through the Twilight Zone.